He frowned ever so slightly as his thoughts turned toward his family. He loved them with all his heart, make no mistake. His wife was a lawyer for a global energy syndicate. She was the smartest, prettiest, and funniest person he had ever met. Sure, that last one typically only appeared after a good number of cocktails, but it didn't matter. For Gil, it had been love at first sight. After 3 years of trying to win her over, it had finally been love at about the 1,000th sight for her. Shortly thereafter, they were married in the suburbs of Chicago. Gil had argued in favor of a honeymoon at Yellowstone, but had been overruled almost immediately. They instead had spent a week on a beach down in Barbados. If Gil had any regrets about marrying Maria, it was that she did not share his love of the outdoors. During the course of their 9 years of wedded bliss, he had made absolutely no progress with regards to changing her mind. Her idea of roughing it was a weekend of being pampered at a spa. To her, the woods were an insufferable hell of biting bugs, poisonous snakes, and all sorts of things that wouldn't bat an eye at eating her alive. So, too, had it been with Carl. The birth of their only child had been nearly mind-blowing for Gil. Not only was he now a father, but his child was a boy to carry on in his footsteps and share in his interests. Sadly, it had not come to pass. Carl was a great kid in almost all aspects. He earned good grades, was popular, and was even polite, a rare thing in children these days. He was everything that any parent could hope for. Unfortunately, he also shared his mother's disdain toward Gil's passion. Sure, he could convince his son to come on the occasional weekend layover, but the boy usually grew bored within an hour of setting up their tent. To him, Mother Nature had nothing to offer that could compete against his PSP. Thus, Gil was forced to compromise, usually in their favor. He'd get a weekend here or there, and he'd always reserve at least 3 days out of his yearly vacation for a getaway. However, these were typically lone outings. Family trips almost always went in Maria's favor, especially since she was usually smart enough to plan them close to either a theme park or fairground. In doing so, she knew Carl was always sure to side with her. Gil had to admit it was hard to plan a good camping trip within walking distance of a killer roller coaster. Plenty of those places had dedicated campgrounds. However, they were often so congested and filthy that he would have preferred a week sleeping in his mother-in-law's backyard. This year was different, though. For the first time ever, Gil had won the argument over the family vacation. He had offered his wife a compromise of 2 days in San Francisco in return for driving east through the Rockies and taking a week-long camping trip deep in the backwoods of Colorado. Neither Maria nor Carl had been happy about it, but even they had to admit that fair was fair. Both had promised to keep an open mind and try to enjoy things. Gil, in return, had assured them that if the campout was a disaster, next year they could have their beaches and amusement parks with nary a peep from him. Unfortunately, 3 days in, it was looking like Gil might be forced to live up to his word. No matter what sights he showed them, his family had been unceasingly miserable. Truth be told, he was glad they had slept in today. His little fishing excursion was the first real enjoyment he had gotten so far on this trip. The loud snap of a stick he stepped on brought Gil out of his reverie. It was silly, but it seemed to have nearly the same report as a gun going off. No wonder, Gil realized a few moments later. All had become silent around him. The chirps and chatter of creatures scurrying through the underbrush had disappeared. He stopped walking and looked around, suddenly glad he hadn't kept any of the fish he had caught. Silence like this usually meant a predator was near. Gil was no fool. Loving the woods had meant learning about them, too. He'd heard similar silences before. Still, he wasn't particularly worried. A black bear would typically give a wide berth. As long as cubs weren't involved, they were often happy to leave people alone.